In the summer of 1994, a small neighborhood in Chicago was rocked by one of the most baffling mysteries anyone had ever seen. It wasn't just any ordinary summer. It was supposed to be filled with laughter, ice cream trucks, and carefree days for children playing outside. But for three families, everything changed forever when their daughters, Aisha, Tanya, and Jasmine, vanished without a trace. The girls were inseparable. Aisha, the oldest at 12 years old, was known for her big dreams of becoming an artist. She loved sketching pictures of flowers and sunsets, always carrying around a worn notebook wherever she went. Tanya, who was 10, was the adventurous one. She could climb trees faster than anyone else and often dared her friends to join her on wild escapades. Jasmine, the youngest at 9, had a contagious laugh that lit up every room she entered. Her favorite thing to do was tell silly jokes, making everyone around her smile. Every afternoon, the trio would head out to play near an abandoned warehouse on the edge of their neighborhood. The building had been empty for years, its windows shattered and walls covered in graffiti. Despite warnings from their parents to stay away, the girls couldn't resist exploring the area. There was something thrilling about pretending they were explorers discovering hidden treasures, or secret agents uncovering clues. To them, the warehouse wasn't scary. It was magical. On August 12, 1994, the day started like any other. The girls left home after lunch, promising to return before dinner. They waved goodbye to their families, unaware that this would be the last time anyone would see them. Hours passed, and as evening approached, their parents grew worried. When the girls didn't come back by nightfall, panic set in. Diane, Aisha's mother, called Marcus, Tanya's father, and Evelyn, Jasmine's grandmother, frantically asking if they'd heard from the girls. None of them had. What followed was chaos. Neighbors joined forces, forming search parties to comb through every street, alley, and park. Police officers arrived, questioning witnesses and setting up roadblocks. Flyers with the girls' smiling faces were plastered across the city, urging anyone with information to come forward. Helicopters buzzed overhead, scanning the landscape for signs of movement. For weeks, the entire community held its breath, praying for a miracle. But no miracle came. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. The initial flurry of activity slowly faded, replaced by a heavy silence that settled over the neighborhood. The police investigated countless leads, but none panned out. Some suggested the girls might have run away, though their families dismissed the idea immediately. These were happy, well-loved children who had no reason to leave. Others whispered about darker possibilities, pointing fingers at strangers or even people within the community. Yet, despite all efforts, there was no evidence to prove any theory. Time dragged on. The case grew colder. News outlets stopped covering the story, and life in the neighborhood tried to return to normal, but it never truly did. Diane spent countless nights staring at her daughter's drawings, wondering what had happened to her. Marcus threw himself into work, trying to distract himself from the gnawing pain in his chest. Evelyn, who had raised Jasmine since she was a baby, found herself unable to pass by the park where the girls used to play without breaking down in tears. The families tried to support each other during those dark times. They formed a small group, meeting regularly to share memories of their daughters and keep hope alive. Sometimes they'd sit together looking at old photographs, laughing softly at stories of Aisha's artistic mishaps or Jasmine's endless stream of jokes. Other times they'd sit in silence, overwhelmed by the weight of their shared grief. Over time, however, even these meetings became less frequent. Life moved on, forcing them to face the harsh reality that their daughters might never be found. Yet, amidst the heartbreak, rumors began to swirl about the abandoned warehouse where the girls were last seen. People claimed strange things happened there, lights flickering in the dead of night, eerie sounds echoing from inside, and shadows moving where no one should be. Some believed the warehouse was cursed, while others thought it hid secrets too terrible to imagine. Eventually, the city decided to demolish the structure, hoping to erase the painful memories associated with it. Bulldozers tore it down, and new buildings took its place. But even then, the whispers refused to die. For 30 long years, the disappearance of Aisha, Tanya, and Jasmine remained unsolved, Their names became part of local lore, mentioned in hushed tones whenever someone walked past the spot where the warehouse once stood. Parents warned their children to stay away, and teenagers dared each other to visit the area late at night, feeding into the growing legend. Meanwhile, the families carried their unanswered questions and unrelenting sorrow, clinging to the faintest glimmer of hope that someday, somehow, the truth would come to light. 30 years had passed since the disappearance of Aisha, Tanya, and Jasmine. The once vibrant neighborhood where they lived had changed dramatically over the decades. Old houses were replaced by modern apartments, and new families moved in, unaware of the haunting history that lingered beneath the surface. For Diane, Marcus, and Evelyn, life had become a series of quiet routines, punctuated by moments of unbearable sadness. Though they rarely spoke about it, the memory of their daughters weighed heavily on their hearts. Diane, now in her late 60s, decided it was finally time to move out of the home she had shared with Aisha. It wasn't easy. Every corner of the house held a piece of her daughter's spirit, but staying there felt like living in a museum of memories rather than a home. One sunny afternoon, as she packed up boxes in the attic, she stumbled upon something she hadn't seen in years: an old shoebox tucked away under a pile of dusty photo albums. Curious, she opened it and found a collection of letters and mementos from the early days of the search for the girls. The letters were exchanges between Diane and Marcus, written during those frantic first months when hope still burned brightly. They detailed plans for organizing searches, sharing tips, and keeping each other strong. As Diane flipped through the pages, tears welled up in her eyes. She remembered how determined they had been, how united they felt in their mission to bring their daughters back. But one item in particular caught her attention: a faded Polaroid photograph she didn't recall seeing before. The picture showed Aisha, Tanya, and Jasmine standing near the abandoned warehouse, their faces glowing with happiness. They looked so carefree, so full of life. Diane smiled at the sight, but then something strange drew her gaze. Behind the girls, barely visible in the shadows, stood a figure. At first glance, it seemed like nothing more than a trick of the light, or a smudge on the photo. But the longer Diane stared, the clearer it became. The figure was tall and slender, its outline blurred but unmistakably human. It appeared to be watching the girls, almost as if it were following them. A chill ran down Diane's spine. She couldn't shake the feeling that this shadowy figure might hold the key to what happened to her daughter and her friends. Determined to get answers, she called Marcus and Evelyn, inviting them over to take a closer look at the photo. When they arrived, Diane spread the contents of the box across her dining table, explaining her discovery. Marcus squinted at the image, his brow furrowing as he examined the mysterious figure. Evelyn gasped, clutching her chest. "I've never seen this before," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But it feels wrong." The trio agreed that the photograph was too significant to ignore. They decided to dig deeper, starting with the location where it was taken, the site of the old warehouse. Over the years, the area had transformed into a small park surrounded by office buildings. While the physical structure was gone, the land still carried echoes of its past. Hoping to uncover new clues, they reached out to Caleb, a local historian and urban explorer known for his fascination with forgotten places and hidden histories. Caleb listened intently as Diane, Marcus, and Evelyn explained their story and showed him the photograph. Intrigued, he promised to help however he could. After some research, he uncovered blueprints of the warehouse that revealed something shocking. Beneath the building lay an extensive, armed with the blueprints Caleb had uncovered, Diane, Marcus, Evelyn, and Caleb himself decided it was time to confront the past head-on. The underground tunnels beneath the old warehouse were uncharted territory, places no one had dared to explore since the building was demolished decades ago. For Diane, Marcus, and Evelyn, this journey wasn't just about finding answers. It was about reclaiming a piece of their daughters that had been stolen from them. They knew the risks involved, but the thought of finally uncovering the truth outweighed their fear. The group gathered at the park where the warehouse once stood, now a quiet patch of greenery surrounded by modern buildings. Caleb carried a backpack filled with flashlights, ropes, and other tools they might need. He led them to a spot near the edge of the park, where overgrown bushes and weeds concealed what appeared to be a rusted metal hatch embedded in the ground. Pulling back the vegetation, Caleb revealed the entrance to the tunnels, a heavy, grimy door with a padlock that had long since corroded away. The sight sent shivers down everyone's spines, but there was no turning back now. With some effort, Caleb managed to pry the hatch open, revealing a dark, narrow staircase descending into the earth. The air that wafted up was damp and musty, carrying the faint scent of decay. It was clear that no one had been down there for years. Diane hesitated for a moment, clutching the photograph of her daughter tightly in her hand. Marcus placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We're doing this for them," he said softly. Evelyn nodded, her jaw set with determination. Taking a deep breath, they stepped inside, their flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. As they descended, deeper into the tunnels, the atmosphere grew heavier. The walls were made of rough concrete, cracked and crumbling in places. Strange symbols were etched into the surface, some resembling twisted animals, others incomprehensible shapes that seemed to writhe under the beam of their flashlights. Caleb paused to examine one of the markings more closely. "These look ritualistic," he muttered, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space. Like someone was trying to leave a message, or a warning. The group pressed on, their footsteps echoing eerily as they moved further into the labyrinth. Every so often, they would come across remnants of what looked like makeshift living quarters, rotting blankets, broken furniture, and empty cans of food scattered across the floor. It was clear that someone had spent a significant amount of time here, though the purpose remained unclear. As they explored, they began to notice even more disturbing artifacts. Children's toys half buried in the dirt, scraps of clothing hanging from nails on the wall, and handwritten notes scrawled on scraps of paper. One note read, "Please help us. We tried to run, but he heard us." Evelyn's hands trembled as she picked up the note, her mind racing with horrifying possibilities. "Whoever did this, they didn't just take our girls," she whispered hoarsely. "They kept them here." Diane felt tears streaming down her face as she clutched Aisha's photo tighter. Marcus clenched his fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface. Despite the overwhelming sense of dread, they forced themselves to keep moving forward. They owed it to their daughters to see this through. Their progress was interrupted when they heard faint whispers drifting through the tunnels. At first they thought it might be the wind or water dripping somewhere in the distance, but the sounds grew louder, more distinct, soft murmurs that seemed to come from all directions at once. Panic began to creep in. "Do you hear that?" Diane asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Caleb nodded, gripping his flashlight tightly. "Stay close," he instructed, scanning the area for any signs of movement. Suddenly, Evelyn froze, pointing her light toward a section of the tunnel ahead. There, looming in the shadows, was a massive steel door reinforced with heavy chains. It looked impenetrable, designed to keep whatever or whoever was inside from escaping. The group exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what they might find beyond it. Caleb pulled out a pair of bolt cutters from his backpack and set to work, the sharp metallic clangs reverberating through the tunnels. Each snip of the chain sent another wave of tension coursing through their bodies. When the final link snapped, the door creaked open with a groan that sounded almost alive. Inside, they found themselves standing in a cavernous chamber lined with rows of small, cramped cells. The sight was enough to make their blood run cold. Each cell contained remnants of lives interrupted, shoes, hairbrushes, clothing, and personal belongings that told silent stories of captivity. In one corner, Diane spotted a chipped porcelain doll, the exact same one Jasmine used to carry everywhere she went. She collapsed to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably as Evelyn rushed to comfort her. Marcus, meanwhile, noticed something else. Carvings on the walls of the cells. Words scratched into the concrete by desperate hands. "Help me," one read. I "Miss my mom," said another. The messages painted a chilling picture of suffering and isolation. Whoever had been held here had endured unimaginable horrors, and yet, despite the despair, there was also evidence of resistance. Drawings of flowers, hearts, and stars etched into the walls, symbols of hope created in the darkest of places. As they took in the scene, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. Their daughters hadn't simply vanished. They had been taken, imprisoned, and subjected to unspeakable cruelty. The discovery was both heartbreaking and infuriating, but it also gave them clarity. For 30 years, they had lived, with uncertainty, haunted by questions without answers. Now, they finally understood the truth, and they knew they couldn't let it stay buried. Caleb broke the silence, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "We need to document everything," he said. "Every carving, every artifact, every detail. This place is a crime scene, and we owe it to your daughters and anyone else who might have been here to bring justice." Nodding in agreement, the group began taking pictures and gathering evidence, determined to ensure that the horrors hidden beneath the earth would never be forgotten. Though they had uncovered the truth, the weight of it lingered heavily in the air. As they prepared to leave the tunnels, each step felt heavier than the last. But amidst the pain and sorrow, there was also a sense of purpose. They had faced the darkness together, and in doing so, they had honored the memory of Aisha, Tanya, and Jasmine. Whatever came next, they knew they wouldn't stop until the world knew their daughters' names and the evil that had stolen them was brought into the light. After emerging from the tunnels, Diane, Marcus, Evelyn, and Caleb felt a mix of emotions. Relief at having uncovered the truth, but also overwhelming grief and anger at the horrors they had witnessed. The evidence they had collected was undeniable, proof that something sinister had taken place beneath the old warehouse. They knew it was their responsibility to bring this information to the authorities, no matter how painful or difficult the process might be. The group drove straight to the police station, their car filled with an eerie silence. Each of them clutched pieces of evidence, photographs of the cells, handwritten notes, and personal belongings like Jasmine's doll. When they arrived, they requested to speak with Detective Harris, a seasoned investigator known for his dedication to cold cases. Though initially skeptical about their claims, the detective listened intently as Diane, her voice trembling, recounted their discovery in vivid detail. She handed over the Polaroid photograph with the shadowy figure, explaining its significance and how it had led them to the tunnels. Detective Harris studied the photo carefully before turning his attention to the artifacts spread out on his desk. His expression shifted from disbelief to concern as he examined the items one by one. "This is disturbing," he admitted, picking up the chipped porcelain doll. "If what you're saying is true, we're dealing with something far more complex and far darker than anyone could have imagined." He promised to take immediate action, assembling a team of forensic experts and detectives to investigate the site thoroughly. Within hours, law enforcement descended upon the park, where the warehouse once stood. Officers cordoned off the area, while forensics teams prepared to enter the tunnels. Caleb accompanied them, acting as a guide due to his familiarity with the layout. As the investigation unfolded, the scale of the tragedy became increasingly apparent. The tunnels contained not only physical evidence but also traces of DNA left behind by those who had been imprisoned there. Hair samples, fingernail fragments, and even dried blood were meticulously collected and sent to the lab for analysis. Back at the precinct, Detective Harris worked tirelessly to piece together the puzzle. Using public records and historical archives, he traced ownership of the warehouse back to the 1980s. What he discovered sent shockwaves through the department. The property had been purchased under false pretenses by a man named Victor Lang. On paper, Lang appeared to be an eccentric recluse with no criminal record. However, further digging revealed a disturbing pattern. Over the years, several children had gone missing in areas near properties owned by Lang, though none of these cases had ever been linked to him. Victor Lang himself had vanished shortly after Aisha, Tanya, and Jasmine disappeared in 1994. At the time, people assumed he had either died or fled the city. But Detective Harris uncovered a shocking twist. Lang had faked his death using fraudulent documents and relocated to a small town in another state. There, he lived quietly under an assumed identity until passing away just 2 years prior due to natural causes. His death certificate listed him as Arthur Grayson, the alias he had adopted decades earlier. Though Victor Lang was beyond justice, his secrets weren't buried with him. A search of his belongings revealed a storage unit rented under his real name. Inside, investigators found journals detailing his twisted obsessions. Lang believed he possessed supernatural powers and claimed that capturing pure souls would grant him immortality. The journals included meticulous entries about his victims, describing how he lured them into his lair and subjected them to psychological torment. Among the names mentioned were Aisha, Tanya, and Jasmine, the first 3 entries in a long list of tragedies. As the investigation progressed, the community reacted with a mixture of horror and sorrow. News outlets picked up the story, reigniting interest in the case that had haunted Chicago for decades. Families of other missing children came forward, sharing stories of loved ones who had vanished without explanation. Many suspected connections between their cases and Lang's crimes. Forensic testing confirmed that DNA recovered from the tunnels matched multiple individuals, including Aisha, Tanya, and Jasmine. For Diane, Marcus, and Evelyn, the confirmation was both heartbreaking and validating. After 30 years of unanswered questions, they finally knew what had happened to their daughters. But the revelations didn't stop there. Investigators discovered that Lang wasn't working alone. Through interviews with former neighbors and acquaintances, they learned that he had recruited accomplices, people too afraid to speak out during his lifetime. One elderly woman, who had lived next door to the warehouse, confessed to seeing strange activity late at night but feared retaliation if she reported it. Another individual admitted to helping Lang transport supplies to the tunnels, unaware of their true purpose. These confessions painted a chilling portrait of a predator operating in plain sight, shielded by fear and silence. As the details emerged, the families of the victims began to heal, not in the sense of forgetting their loss but in finding closure. Diane, Marcus, and Evelyn held a press conference alongside Detective Harris, urging anyone with information about similar cases to come forward. Their courage inspired others to share their stories, creating a ripple effect that brought renewed hope to countless families still searching for answers. For the authorities, the case served as a wake-up call. It highlighted the importance of listening to marginalized voices and investigating urban legends tied to forgotten places. Policies were implemented to ensure that abandoned buildings and suspicious activities were monitored more closely. Community outreach programs were launched to educate residents about recognizing signs of danger and reporting concerns without fear of judgment. Despite the progress, the emotional toll weighed heavily on everyone involved. Diane often found herself staring at Aisha's drawings, imagining the life her daughter might have led if given the chance. Marcus struggled with guilt, wondering if he could have done more to protect Tanya. Evelyn visited Jasmine's favorite park regularly, leaving flowers near the bench where the girls used to sit. Yet, amid the pain, they also found strength in each other. Together, they vowed to honor their daughter's memories by ensuring that no family would suffer the same fate again. The final chapter of this tragic story wasn't just about uncovering the truth. It was about transforming grief into action. Diane, Marcus, and Evelyn founded a foundation dedicated to supporting families of missing children. Named after Aisha, Tanya, and Jasmine, the organization provided resources for navigating the legal system, offered counseling services, and advocated for policy changes to prevent future tragedies. In doing so, they turned their unimaginable loss into a legacy of hope and resilience. Though the scars would never fully fade, the families took solace in knowing that their daughters' voices had been heard. Justice may have eluded them in life, but in death, Aisha, Tanya, and Jasmine became symbols of perseverance, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, love endures. The discovery of the tunnels beneath the old warehouse and the subsequent investigation brought a measure of closure to Diane, Marcus, Evelyn, and the entire community. But for the families of Aisha, Tanya, and Jasmine, this was not the end. It was the beginning of a new chapter. The truth they had uncovered was painful, but it also gave them a purpose: to ensure that no other family would have to endure the same anguish they had suffered for 30 long years. In the months following the investigation, the city rallied around Diane, Marcus, and Evelyn. Their courage in confronting the past inspired countless others to speak out about their own experiences with loss and injustice. Community meetings were held at the local library, where people shared stories of loved ones who had disappeared or whose cases remained unsolved. These gatherings fostered a sense of solidarity, reminding everyone that they were not alone in their pain. Slowly but surely, the neighborhood began to heal, not by forgetting but by remembering together. One of the most significant outcomes of the case was the creation of a memorial dedicated to Aisha, Tanya, Jasmine, and all the other victims of Victor Lang's crimes. The site chosen for the memorial was the park where the warehouse once stood, the very place where the girls had last been seen alive. Designed by a team of local artists and volunteers, the memorial featured 3 life-sized bronze statues representing Aisha, Tanya, and Jasmine. Each statue held an object symbolic of their personalities. Aisha clutched her sketchbook, Tanya stood atop a tree stump as if mid-adventure, and Jasmine cradled her beloved porcelain doll. Surrounding the statues was a circular garden filled with vibrant flowers, symbolizing hope and resilience. On the day of the unveiling ceremony, hundreds of people gathered to pay their respects. Families of the victims, friends, neighbors, and even strangers came together to honor the memory of the girls. Diane, Marcus, and Evelyn stood side by side, holding hands as they watched the cloth covering the statues fall away. Tears streamed down their faces, but there was also a profound sense of peace. For the first time in decades, they felt like their daughters' lives were being celebrated rather than mourned. During the ceremony, Evelyn delivered a heartfelt speech. Her voice trembled, but her words carried strength and conviction. Aisha, Tanya, and Jasmine were more than just our daughters, she said. They were bright lights in a world that sometimes feels too dark. They taught us how to laugh, how to dream, and how to love deeply. Though we lost them far too soon, their spirits live on in everything we do. Today we honor them not as victims, but as heroes. Heroes who remind us to never stop fighting for justice no matter how hard the battle may be. Her words resonated deeply with those in attendance. Many left the ceremony feeling inspired to take action in their own communities, whether by volunteering, raising awareness about missing persons, or simply offering support to someone in need. The memorial became a sacred space, a place where people could reflect, grieve, and find solace. Flowers, candles, and handwritten notes appeared regularly at the base of the statues, each one a testament to the enduring impact of the girls' lives. For Diane, Marcus, and Evelyn, the foundation they founded, named the Light Within Foundation, became their lifeline. The organization quickly gained traction, attracting donations, volunteers, and partnerships with national advocacy groups. Its mission was twofold: to provide immediate assistance to families searching for missing loved ones and to push for systemic changes that would prevent such tragedies in the future. One of its flagship programs was a 24/7 hotline staffed by trained counselors who offered emotional support and practical guidance to callers. Another initiative focused on educating law enforcement agencies about the importance of treating every missing person case with urgency, regardless of race, gender, or socioeconomic status. The foundation also launched a campaign called Remember Their Names, aimed at keeping the stories of missing children alive in the public consciousness. Through social media, billboards, and community events, they highlighted cases that had fallen through the cracks, urging people to remain vigilant and report any information, no matter how small. The campaign struck a chord with many, leading to renewed interest in several cold cases and even a few breakthroughs. As the foundation grew, so did its reach. Diane, Marcus, and Evelyn traveled across the country, speaking at conferences, schools, and town halls. They shared their story not to elicit pity, but to inspire action. At each event, they emphasized the importance of unity and perseverance. "We didn't give up because we knew our daughters deserved better," Diane often said. And neither should you. Every child matters. Every life is worth fighting for. Their efforts earned widespread recognition, including awards from human rights organizations and features in major news outlets. Yet, despite the accolades, the trio remained humble. For them, success wasn't measured in headlines or trophies. It was measured in the number of families they helped and the policies they influenced. They worked tirelessly behind the scenes, ensuring that their foundation stayed true to its mission. Over time, the legacy of Aisha, Tanya, and Jasmine extended beyond their families and the community. Schools named scholarships after the girls, encouraging students to pursue their passions in art, exploration, and storytelling. Artists created murals depicting their smiling faces, turning blank walls into vibrant reminders of joy and resilience. Even local businesses got involved, donating portions of their profits to the foundation and hosting fundraisers to keep the cause alive. For Diane, Marcus, and Evelyn, the journey was far from easy. There were days when the grief felt overwhelming, when the weight of their loss threatened to pull them under. But they found strength in each other and in the knowledge that their work was making a difference. They took comfort in small victories. A family reunited with their child. A policy change implemented. A stranger reaching out to say thank you. These moments reminded them why they kept going, even when the road ahead seemed impossibly difficult. On quiet evenings, Diane would sit in her living room surrounded by Aisha's drawings, imagining what her daughter might think of all they had accomplished. Marcus often visited Tanya's favorite climbing tree, whispering updates about the foundation's progress as if sharing secrets with an old friend. Evelyn returned to the park bench where Jasmine used to giggle uncontrollably, leaving fresh flowers and recounting stories of her granddaughter's bravery. In these moments, they felt closest to their daughters, not as distant memories but as guiding forces cheering them on. 30 years had passed since the girls disappeared, but their presence was stronger than ever. Aisha, Tanya, and Jasmine were no longer defined by their tragic fate. They were remembered for the light they brought into the world and the change they inspired. Their names became synonymous with hope, resilience, and the unyielding power of love. As the sun set on the day of the memorial unveiling, Diane, Marcus, and Evelyn stood together, gazing at the statues bathed in golden light. The air was filled with the sound of laughter from children playing nearby, a sound that hadn't been heard in that park for a very long time. Diane reached out and gently touched the hand of Aisha's statue, her fingers tracing the delicate lines of the bronze sketchbook.